biology. And so how do we catch the fish and how do we count them? So first off, I wanted to kind of give you how I got to GMRI. So I grew up in Orange, Massachusetts. It's really kind of a small town in central western Massachusetts, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from the coast. But I spent a lot of time at the ocean and the lakes, and was always kind of catching animals, and figured I wanted to work with animals in some sort of way when I was growing up. So after high school, I decided I was going to go to the University of Maine at Machias. It's a really small school right on the coast of Maine. And there I studied both marine biology and biology. From the University of Maine at Machias, I actually got a job with the Maine Department of Marine Resources, and I was working with the Bureau of Sea Run Fisheries up in Jonesboro. So we were going through the lakes and streams, trying to find some salmon redds and create a suitable habitat for Atlantic salmon to go upstream. Using that fisheries knowledge, I actually got a job as a Northeast fisheries observer. I was based out of Gloucester, Massachusetts, and what we were doing, we were going on commercial fishing vessels, and we were monitoring their catch and bycatch. We were taking length and weight samples of all the fish that they were catching, and we were also getting age samples using an ear bone, the otolith, which you can get the age of the fish, as well as scales, which you can also tell the age of a fish. I did that for about 4 years, and led me to my job at GMRI. This picture was actually taken last year by Ewan herself. She was out, and we were helping we were doing coastal Casco Bay Aquatic System Survey. It's a program that we have at GMRI where we are looking for juvenile fish in Casco Bay. What you're actually seeing us use right here, it's actually called a beach seine, and we go up to the shoreline and we make a big U. And what happens is the fish kind of get corralled into a pocket at the end. And once we bring that pocket onto shore, we can measure and identify all the fish that were in that area at that time. So one thing that I always like to do is I want to let people know what type of fish are in the bottom of the Gulf of Maine. This is only a very small subsample, and we're going to go through and do a little guessing game, see if you guys can identify these fish. Can anybody tell me what this is? You can write it in the chat and I'll be able to see that. And we'll kind of go through that as we go through some of these fish. Anybody have any guesses? You guys can put it right in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing bass, catfish, dogfish, dog shark, catfish, oversized catfish, big fish. These are all great guesses. Goldfish. This is actually an Atlantic cod. It's one of the most historical fish in the Gulf of Maine. And you can tell that it's a cod by this olive green coloration, as well as this lateral line and the 3 dorsal fins. What about this guy? This is the portion of the fish that would actually be flat on the ocean bottom. And if you flipped it over, you'd see both eyes on the other side. Tuna, blobfish, drum, stingray, flatfish, stingray, sunfish, flatfish. These are all very good answers. Angelfish, stingray. Nice. This is an Atlantic halibut. And this fish is actually making a pretty good comeback. So as you can tell, they get very, very big. And you can tell the difference between a halibut versus a flounder, because this tail goes in a little bit, whereas a flounder tail will come out. What about this guy? Now this, instead of the halibut, you're actually seeing the other side, and you're seeing both eyes on one side. Bass, copperhead, redfin tuna, all good guesses. bass, angelfish, halibut, sunfish. Nice, copperhead, sunfish, sunfish.
Got a couple of flounder guesses.
Yep, couple of flounders. Yep, this is an American place flounder. It's actually one of several flounder species in the Gulf of Maine. You can tell it's an American place flounder because of this brown coloration, and they have a big jaw for a flounder. It can also be called, it's also known as a dab or a sand dab in parts of Maine. What about this guy? Bass, dab, flounder. Oh yeah, you guys, turtle, okay. Bass, flounder. Yep, it's another flounder. It is another flounder. This one is a winter flounder. It's also called the blackback flounder. And you can tell based on this kind of olive green coloration, and this one has some dark spots as well. And it actually has a very small mouth, so it can't eat as large a prey. All right, let's go through another one. Sunfish. The fins do look really nice. I like it too. Flounder, sunfish, yep. Copperhead. Sunfish. This one is another flounder. This one's a yellowtail flounder. It's a little more popular in the southern Gulf of Maine. And if you actually flip this guy over, it has yellow lines going through the tail, and the tint of the tail is yellow. What about this one? Don't mind the squid. We'll focus on the fish itself. Creepy. All right. Tuna, herring, sucker, bass. This one is very common to be. This one, a lot of people eat this one. Salmon, bass, tuna, cod, bass, tuna. It's actually in the same family as the cod. It has the 3 dorsal fins as well. This one is actually called a haddock. And you can tell the haddock because of this white body with a silver top, and all haddock have this dark black spot, and they actually call it God's thumbprint. All right, so now that we know what some of the fish that live in the Gulf of Maine, how do we catch them? Can anybody tell me what kind of fishing gear this is? Nets? Yep. A lot of them are nets, big net, nice. This one is actually a gill net. So this is actually, this stays, the fisherman drops this off and then comes back to pick it up the next day. And the fish will swim through, and depending on the size of the fish, will get stuck by the gills, and that's how they get caught. What about this one? Now these anchor hooks. Yep, food net, anchor net, hooks. You're spelling it right, but you're good. Yep, this one is a bottom long line. And so it's named because this is just a long line of hooks. And these are all baited, and they can catch, depending on the size of the hooks, they can catch different types of fish. Will anybody know what this one is? Dragnet, fishing net, dragnet. Yep. Yeah, a lot of people are saying dragnet, and that is what some people call it. It's called the bottom trawl or dragnet. So you guys are spot on. And what happens is the boat pulls the net behind the boat. The boat pulls the net behind it, and the fish can get caught in this end here. Nemo net finding Nemo. Nice. Anybody get an idea what this one is? And just for a fun fact, this fish is actually, it is still an Atlantic cod, but since it lives, it stays its whole life in the kelp forest, it turns into a red fish. It turns more reddish instead of that olive green. So the cod can kind of change color depending on where they're living. And it is just using a regular rod and reel. Yep. So yep, fishing rod. This is more used by recreational fishermen, but you can have commercial fishermen using rod and reel systems. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what a bottom trawl looks like coming up off of what the bottom trawl looks like coming up back onto the boat, kind of give you a size perspective. So this is a day fishing vessel, and here's the video. You have some ground gear coming up. You have a foot rope or a sweep, and then you have a head rope. That kind of brings it down into the body, which leads to, this is the drag net that I was showing you, or the bottom trawl. And what that does is it pushes all the fish down towards what's called a cod end. And in that cod end is where most of the fish end up getting caught, and then will come on board, and the fisherman will pull a rope that releases that, and doop, all the fish fall back onto the deck. And this video is actually taken on one of our research trips. So it's kind of a shorter tow. It doesn't actually have the same amount as you would normally see. So you'll see the fisherman, he puts the board there so the fish don't all fall back into the ocean on him. He pulls that rope. And the fish start falling out of the cod end so that we can sort them, and we can get rid of the bycatch or the unwanted catch. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like. All right, so now that we know what kind of fish are here and how to catch them, how do we only catch what we want? So we can use the morphology of a fish, or how the fish are shaped. Are they a round fish or a flat fish? A round fish is being more like a cod or a haddock, whereas a flat fish is more like the flounder. What size ranges are there? Are they only about a foot long? How big do they actually get? And then the physiology, how they function. Do they have an air bladder? This can kind of affect if you can see them using an acoustic system, which actually sends sound down into the water, and the air bladder will give you a bigger signal, and it makes it easier to find them on like a fish finder. What temperatures do they need? This is actually really important right now because the Gulf of Maine is warming up. So their temperature ranges are kind of changing, and fish are moving more and more to adapt to different temperatures. And then what depths do they live at? Do they live in shallower water? Do they live really in deep water? These these all matter for how to catch what we want to catch. And then when do they mature, and what types of areas do they like to use for reproducing? A lot of fish go to the same area all the time, and you can actually create a closure for a spawn enclosure. And that spawn enclosure will protect those fish from being caught while they are reproducing. And then behavior. So how a fish acts. How close to the bottom do they live? So there's different, even though it might be called the ground fish, there's different layers at the bottom and where they kind of can live. And then what type of bottom do they prefer? Do they prefer flat, muddy bottoms, or do they like to live in rocks and crevices? And then how do they react to different gear types? If a net's coming at them, what do they do? Do they dip, dodge, dive? And then what's their stamina level? Do they really fight getting caught, or do they kind of just give up and kind of float back into the bend of the cod end? So now that we know all these different things, I want to go over a real problem about what we have. So Atlantic cod they're at an all-time low abundance in the Gulf of Maine. And these cod are now caught as bycatch with normal fishing gear. The fishermen don't really want to catch them. And the unfortunate part about this is all of the gear has been kind of modified to catch the cod throughout time, because they've been one of the most commercially valuable species in history. So now if the fishers that catch too many, they'll be forced to stop fishing, even if there are other fish around that are sustainable. And this is the biggest problem. It can actually stop the fishermen from fishing entirely. So we need to figure out some possible solutions to this. So we can use the differences in their morphology, physiology, and behavior to modify existing gear types. And the fishers can actually change their behavior as well. They can fish in different spots that they don't believe that they have lower amounts of cod. And we can also use a square mesh in the cod end, and that will allow cod to escape easier than flounders. So what happens is on a round, for a cod, it's a round fish, and the square cod end, when it gets tight, it doesn't change its shape. But the other size of a cod end is a diamond, and when that pressure gets put on a diamond, what happens is that diamond cinches up, and it actually makes it so that it's harder for a cod to escape. But a flounder can still escape out of that type of cod end. All right, so what we know is that cod, they tend to swim up higher in the water column than flounders do. So you have flounders right on the bottom, they're laying flat on the ocean floor. Then about 2 to 3 feet above them, that's where the cod like to hang out. So how can we use this to our advantage is we can put tie downs for gill nets. So you take the top of a gill net and you can tie it down to the bottom, and what it does is it makes kind of a shorter U, and it only is about 3 feet high versus about 12 feet high. And this allows the cod to kind of swim up and over those gill nets, but it still has the flounders and the bottom fish, and the flatfish, they still get caught. What we can also do is we created an ultra low opening trawl. And what this does is it takes a drag net or bottom trawl, and instead of opening about 8 feet, we kind of shrink that down to 2 feet. And so what happens then is you're only fishing about 2 feet off the ground, and the cod are swimming up and over the head rope, and they don't end up getting caught. What this did is it actually created a 45% reduction in cod catches while it actually retained the same amount of flounders. And this is awesome if you want to go fishing for flounders and you don't want to catch the cod. So what happens if you do want to catch, but you also won't catch haddock or pollock or anything swimming above the cod as well? So what happens if you want to catch haddock and not flounders? So we also know that haddock tend to swim up higher in the water than cod do. So you have the flounders, and then you have cod about 2 to 3 feet above them, and then you have haddock at about another 2 to 3 feet above the cod. So we can use a net called a haddock separator trawl. The cool thing about this net is you have your ground gear here, and this, if the fish are in this portion of the net, it actually opens up back into open ocean and they're not caught. But if they're swimming higher in the water column, they get into this portion of the net and they get caught in the cod end. So what's happening is it's actually separating the cod from the haddock. So the cod go down here, swim out, and the haddock go up here and get caught. You can also use an off-bottom trawl, which was, we recently helped design it with Massachusetts Department of Marine Fisheries. And basically what an off-bottom trawl is you take this sweep, this ground gear, and you actually have it fishing up here. So you don't have any of the net touching the bottom of the ground. And you can use this especially in areas that are sensitive to being trawled, and you have very little impact on the bottom itself. And you're still catching the same amount of haddock as you would on a regular trawl. And then you can also use what's called an automatic jig machine. And so you can actually program this. It's kind of just like a fishing rod, and you can program it to only fish like 3 or 4 feet above the bottom. And there you're targeting the haddock and pollock versus targeting cod. Another thing that we know is that when cod see a barrier, what they tend to do is they tend to swim up and away from that barrier. So using this knowledge, we created a Murphy's Web Trawl. And what that does is it includes a barrier that cod can see and avoid being captured. One actually really cool note about this is that we use blue twine, which cod can see better than any other color. So we can use that to our advantage as well. What this project did is there was about a 40% reduction rate in cod catch while retaining the same amount of flounders. The really cool part about this project is that anybody can go and buy this web this web and put it on their own net. They don't have to buy a completely new net. So it makes it more accessible for commercial fishermen. And here's a quick video of the Murphy's Web Trawl. So here is the foot rope, and then here's the head rope, and this is the mesh barrier that connects the two. So this is kind of fishing along. Our goal, what we really wanted to do is kind of get a picture of a video of cod swimming up and over, but unfortunately they were living too deep and we didn't have enough light to actually capture it. And then here is a view from behind the head rope. And this is a sensor, a head rope sensor that actually tells us how high up off the ground we really are. So this is a video of a trawl actually going over the bottom. We saw some swimming away over there. So let's combine those two ideas. So one of our latest experiments was to combine the ultra low opening trawl with the web design. So have an ultra low opening trawl that had that web. Unfortunately, it didn't work out as well as we thought it would. And it actually reduced the amount of flounders. And what was happening was there wasn't enough flexibility in the net itself. So what we did is we actually modified the net further, and we were able to catch the same amount of flounders as the unmodified trawl. We put bungee cords instead of regular rope and gave it the flexibility to stay on the bottom. And here's a nice little video of me actually on the boat. So this was during our modified ULOT trawls. This is a tote of different monkfish, which is a bottom fish. And then you have all these flounders here. And we actually measured, in the end, it was over 18,000 fish from our research trips total. So we had 18,000 length measurements for 12 trips. And so here we take the fish out, get the measurement, record that down, and I'm actually separating them out between kept and discarded fish here. And we're doing that by their legal size limits. So you're not allowed to keep a flounder that is under 12 inches. And that's just kind of gives a glimpse of what we do in the actual field. Anybody have any questions?
You can go ahead and add your questions to the chat.
No. Okay.
All right, I see one. How long have you been working on a boat for?
Total, it's coming up onto 11 years of doing research with commercial fishermen.
Excellent. I also see, what is your favorite fish to catch?
My favorite fish is a wolffish. There's kind of a cool fish. Has really, you're not allowed to keep them anymore, but they have this really like thick jaw, and it's used to crush scallops and lobsters. So they have these really powerful teeth. It's really kind of an ugly looking fish, to be perfectly honest, but yeah, it's a really cool fish. It's kind of like a combination between an eel and a cod.
I have another question about bycatch. So does catching cod harm them, even if you throw them back in the water?
So it can definitely harm them, even if you're throwing them back in the water. They have what's called the sequelizer, and what it does is you can actually clip it to the fish's jaw, and it brings them down at a more regulated pace. And what it does is it reduces their barotrauma, or sometimes you'll see the fish will come up and they have kind of bulging eyes because they come up from a really deep surface too quickly. But there are ways that you can reduce the amount of stress the fish has.
Thank you. I also have a couple questions about catching big fish. So what is the biggest fish you ever caught, and have you ever caught any sharks?
So the biggest one I've caught is probably a shark. I've seen a basking shark caught, which can get about 30 feet. Um, and that was it's a bycatch. It wasn't intentional at all. But yeah, that was the biggest one. That's the biggest one that I've caught. And that is, I guess, a shark as well. So
How do you accidentally catch a 30-foot shark?
its tail got caught up in a gill net.
All right, I have another one that says, what made you pick this job at GMRI?
This when we picked this job is that I really enjoyed working with commercial fishermen. I like doing collaborative research, and the job here at GMRI would allow me to do that. So that's why.
There we go. And how long does it take to make the proper materials for fishing?
A lot of these projects, they are multiple year projects, but we usually have meetings with fishermen to we the way that we make these gear designs is we have a lot of fishermen in the room giving us guidance as well, and it can take a couple of years to develop, but actually making the material isn't too hard.
Okay. What is your least favorite fish to catch?
Probably a torpedo ray. They're really big, and they send an electric pulse when they're caught, so it can give you a little bit of a shock if it's unexpected, if you don't see them in the fish pile and you grab it by mistake.
Ah, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What about lobster? Have you ever accidentally caught a lobster?
Yeah, lobsters are caught in bottom trawls quite a bit. They can also get caught in gill nets. Yes, so yeah, we catch lobsters with both gear, but you're not allowed to land lobsters in Maine if they're not caught by a pot and trap.
Good to know. All right. What is the craziest fish you ever caught?
Let's see. I mean, the basking shark was pretty crazy to catch, honestly. Yeah, I mean that one is definitely a crazy catch.
I would think so. When did you know you wanted to become a scientist?
Probably in high school. That's when I kind of figured out I wanted to be a scientist. When I was trying to choose a career path. Yeah, so I knew I kind of wanted to be a scientist around, I don't know, junior year of high school.
I see another question. Do you ever eat the fish that you
All the time. Yes.
catch?
Yep. Yeah, there's not a lot of different fish in the Gulf of Maine that I haven't tried. I think all of them are worth a shot at least once to try. Twice if they're good.
Yeah. Have you ever gone fishing outside of Maine?
Yes. Yep. I have been fishing. The furthest I've gone actual fishing on a commercial boat is North Carolina.
Ah.
So I've been fishing out of Hatteras a couple times. But for fun, I've gone fishing out of Florida for fun.
Cool. So I think this question is about that modified net you were showing us towards the end. And the question is does that double net ever get caught in the wrong places?
Like, does it get caught on like a rock or something? No, it didn't, because when you're using these nets, you want to use them in places that you know they're not going to get caught on things. So fishermen have a map on their boat that tells them where a fish, where a shipwreck would be, or where a giant rock would be. We were fishing with these nets that are kind of on muddy, flat bottoms.
Okay. Have you ever lost a net, like altogether?
Personally, no. Not a big trawl net like that. I've been on boats that they've lost a gill net before, yeah. But a big net that's attached to the boat is much harder to lose, but it does happen every once in a while.
Okay. I've got one question of about how many fish do you think you've caught in your lifetime?
Oh, I don't know, probably up in the hundreds of thousands, I guess, throughout the whole time.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah, oh, maybe more than that, because I've gone fishing on herring vessels too that catch a lot of fish at a time.
Okay. I see someone else ask, where have you caught the most fish at once, like location wise?
Um, Probably herring fishing, with a pair trawl, and it was, I think the most that I've caught was probably out on George's Bank. It's about 100 miles offshore.
Oh, cool. So I've seen a couple of different people asking about how happy you are at your job. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Personally, I love my job. Um, I like being out on the water. I like doing things with my hands, actually catching and holding the fish. It's a lot of fun. Um, so it's definitely really happy in the summertime when I'm doing all of the field work. It's a little less happy when I'm entering all the data, but it's always fun to see all the work in the summer, how it pays off in the wintertime. So um, yeah, I do really actually enjoy my job.
I'd love to hear that. Have you ever seen a dolphin?
Yes, all the time. I see quite a few dolphins. I've seen dolphins. I've seen whales. Um, Mostly for whales, I've seen pilot whales, humpback whales, fin whales. And then for the dolphins, I've seen white-sided, common. I've seen bottlenose down in Florida,
Wow.
harbor porpoise, all those.
Have you ever fallen into the water while trying to get the fish out?
No, nope, I have not. And if I do, I have a life jacket on and I know all the proper safety things. Um, but yeah, no, I've never fallen out of the boat on
Well, that's
purpose.
good to hear.
I get out of the boat and into the water when I'm doing work in the summer in Cascade, but that's, yeah. If I don't mean to get off the boat, I don't.
What would you say is the coolest experience you've had on the ocean?
um, the coolest experience has probably with a purse seine fishery. I didn't go over it in this presentation, but um, they fish at nighttime, and basically they make a circle around the fish with a net, and then they kind of roll the net into the boat. And what it does is a big silvery wave of herring will kind of come up off the top off of the net. So it's a really kind of a really interesting sight. It's probably one of the coolest that I've seen.
Yeah, that does sound pretty special.
Yeah.
So, thinking about climate change, what kind of advice would you have for people who fish for lobsters or for fish as the waters are getting warmer?
I would say be open to changing up your gear or your tactics, and try to push regulations before things become an issue or before you see the species come up in abundance. Have a plan in place so you can take advantage of the different species that are coming up.
That's some good advice. Do you ever go ice fishing?
Yes, yeah, I do. I like to go ice fishing. It's something I enjoy doing with my own kids.
Wonderful. How do you work with other scientists to answer questions? And what do you do when you disagree with the other scientists?
Um, so a lot of times when we kind of pick who we want to work with for scientists, based on what their specialties are, and a lot of times we'll talk through an issue and as a group kind of determine what the best route is that we go.
Wonderful. I think we've got time for maybe two more questions. What do you catch when you go ice fishing?
When I go ice fishing, it's sometimes bass, pickerel, perch, things of that sort.
Awesome. I'm also seeing, have you ever touched a dolphin?
Yep, yeah, I've touched dolphins. Um, yeah, when if ever call a dolphin or a shark comes on board, we take measurements, and as long as it's safe to do so, we take measurements and try to get weight estimates. And yeah, we do. We definitely try to figure out reasons that they were caught so we can avoid it in the future.
Cool. I'm also seeing a couple times I've seen people ask, do you ever use bait to catch fish?
Yep. Yes, you use bait a lot of times if you're using a rod and reel to catch something, or if you are using a bottom long line. You'll put bait on those hooks. So whenever you're using hook gear, you can use bait.
Wonderful. And I think for the last one, I'm going to ask, have you ever caught tuna? I've seen that a few times from here too.
I personally have never caught a tuna. I would love to go fishing for a tuna. I'm gonna have to talk to Walt, who works at GMRI, and he goes fishing for tuna all the time. And I'm gonna have to get out on one of his trips to actually go do it. So I'm not doing any of my own research, but I will gladly go help somebody else out.
Wonderful. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.